исключено доступ к интернету. Ну, давай. Больше буду. Окей. Пока никто не смотрит. Смотрим. Здравствуйте, наши веб-зрители! Сегодня мы в нашей студии вместе с нашим сотрудником, с нашим венгерским юристом, а также английским юристом и немножко русским юристом. Значит, здесь мы собрались сегодня, потому что к нам обратились наши слушатели с предложением темы рассказать о нетрадиционных оффшорах. И в качестве примера такого оффшора была предложена Венгрия. Поэтому, собственно говоря, мы здесь и вместе с Аней Кушапок, которая как раз венгерский юрист. Значит, я перехожу дальше на английский. Впоследствии вы сможете посмотреть стенограмму как на английском, так и на русском. Аника говорит по-русски, но в данном случае удобнее будет вести диалог по-английски. So, maybe before I ask the main question whether Hungary is offshore or not offshore, you will say just a few words about yourself regarding your Hungarian experience and so on.
Yes, well, as Alexander introduced me in Russian just a second ago, I am originally a Hungarian qualified lawyer. I have worked in Hungary with a large international law firm for many years and dealt with tax planning, international tax planning and corporate restructurings. And I also have some experience having worked in the city of London, where I qualified as a UK solicitor.
So you have both experience in Hungary and in other countries to compare Hungary with the other offshore and onshore jurisdictions. So the main question and the main illusion which we should eliminate now is whether Hungary is offshore jurisdiction.
Well, offshore in terms of the perception of people what offshore is, no, Hungary isn't. If you think about offshore as a sunny island where the corporate tax rate is zero, then Hungary is not an offshore. If we go a little bit deeper, anything is offshore for any client which is happening not in his own jurisdiction. But no, Hungary, strictly speaking, is not an offshore jurisdiction. Hungary is member of the European Union, has been already for 10 years. All directives of the European Union apply to Hungary, and the country continuously tries to comply with the expectations and regulations of the European Union. Having said that, there are several features which are and have been maintained from historical features from before, such as or like how it's done in Cyprus, for example. Regardless of the opposition of the European Union. Why Hungary might come into people's mind as an offshore jurisdiction? Because until 1996, but then we talk about a long time ago and way before Hungary joined the European Union, there was an international business company regime in Hungary as well. That was a classic offshore type of legislation.
Which means that the company...
That means that companies which did not carry out activity on the territory of Hungary enjoyed very preferential tax treatment and so on and so forth. But I have to admit that was way before my practice. But I of course am aware that there were such features in the jurisdictions, but not anymore, and not for about 20 years now.
I see. Okay, but since the interest to Hungary still there is some, it seems to be there are some tax planning or tax advantages which may attract the businessman.
Businessmen continuously search for, especially for holding jurisdictions, where they may place a holding company which benefits from features that suit the holding function. Hungary is not. It sometimes actually falls on the list of of those holding jurisdictions which are considered by businesses. Why? Because what do we look for when we look for a holding jurisdiction? We want preferably tax-free receipts of profit distribution from subsidiaries of that holding company. We want preferably tax-free receipt of liquidation proceeds, i.e. there would not be capital gains taxed once the holding company sells its subsidiaries. And further up on the chain, we usually look for tax-free possibilities to distribute profits, interest and royalties to the holding of that holding company, to the mother company of that holding company. Hungary actually does have all these features, as well as the country itself has a very extensive double tax treaty network, and also benefits from a reliable binding ruling regime. It is possible to obtain advanced binding rulings from the Ministry of Finance and the Tax Authority. So so transactions planned in the future can be tested by the Ministry of Finance, and the content of the binding ruling will be binding on the Tax Authority. So it provides some sort of certainty for the taxpayer with respect to transactions that will be carried out in the future. But back to the basic elements. As I said, Hungarian companies enjoy tax exemption on dividends received from foreign subsidiaries. From and out. So. Unless the subsidiary is a controlled foreign company, but without getting into the very complicated definition of a Hungarian definition of a controlled foreign company, it should be enough that if a classic offshore, which otherwise could be a CFC elsewhere, is owned by a foreigner and not by a Hungarian individual, then that company will not be a CFC. And for that reason, even classic offshore companies owned by a Hungarian holding company can distribute their profit with a corporate income tax exemption in Hungary. The same applies to capital gain tax on the sale of shares of these subsidiaries, in case it's a reported interest regime in Hungary. So the Hungarian holding company should report to the Hungarian tax authority when acquired these interests. But if such interest is more than 10% and remains in the ownership of the Hungarian company for at least 1 year, then such shares can be sold without capital gain tax payment in Hungary. And as you referred already, distributions, dividend, interest and royalty distributions from a Hungarian company to a mother company abroad are withholding tax-free.
According to at least this criteria, it is much more favorable than some quite prestigious and well-known jurisdictions like Switzerland, Austria.
And even if I tell you that further that the corporate income tax rate that is payable on normal, let's say normal business activities up to the tax base of 1.7 million euro is 10%, and over that is 19%. But the 19% only payable on the part of the tax base which falls above 1.7 million euros. So in that terms, small and medium tax base we are talking about. So tax income minus deductibles, right?
1.7 million
euros. So
that's
small and medium-sized businesses can well benefit from such low tax rates, which I think very few people know that apart from Cyprus, there is another European country which has such a low corporate tax rate.
It is more.
Even more, yeah. I mean,
12.5.
comparable. It's probably Ireland, Cyprus, Hungary, and this is it in Europe.
What I remember that the minimum possible rate in Europe is now 12.5, which is in Cyprus, Ireland, and Liechtenstein. Less, I haven't heard.
Because of this allowance, it's only up to 1.7 million, and so the official corporate tax rate is 19%. In the allowance, then it's then up to.
That's interesting.
So these very basic features would probably put Hungary as a jurisdiction in a good light to many investors and businessmen who are hunting for the right jurisdiction for a holding company. What could be the setbacks one come? Because why not everybody then have a Hungarian holding company? One of the main elements I would like to point out is the little bit. I mean, the country is located in Eastern Europe, and that already probably a giveaway that the reliability of legislators, the frequent changes of legislation and rules, make it sometimes difficult to plan ahead and set up a structure for 10-15 years when definitions and legislations are changing on a yearly basis. These are not always huge changes, but still there are changes which will drive up professional fees. We are talking about a country where the only official language is Hungarian. So local advisors are needed, lawyers, accountants, auditors. So maybe the maintenance and the compliance cost which comes with the company might differ some people.
I see. So this is local advisors. And what about local employees, accountant, directors?
If we talk about technicalities, that's setting up a company. Hungarian, we are talking about unlimited companies, like usually the two of our clients. The company will need a shareholder, a director. The shareholder can be foreign, can be Hungarian, can be private individual or corporate. There is no restriction. The director has to be a physical person. That person can be Hungarian and can be foreign. There is again no restriction on that, but there is no corporate directorship.
As everywhere now.
Yes, as this is really the tendency everywhere. Yes, exactly. There is one negative point here. It's a recent development. It's been introduced about 2 years ago, that the director of the company will have to be insured under the local national insurance regulations. It means, just to put it very simply, as if the director was employed. This is not, strictly speaking, employment. The director can be employed or can be a consultant on a contract, but there is the Hungarian national wage on which the company, or after which the company needs to pay national insurance and taxes. And that will bring the, unless that private individual person will have another employment or consultancy relationship in the country, but it's generally not the case with foreign investors, obviously. So that will bring a standard about $300 cost a month just to keep the director in his seat.
300.
This is the statutory payments. This is not remuneration to company.
$300.
Yes, $300 a month, which is definitely payable. There is another point. Nominee directorship is not customary in the country. The concept is not really known. I mean, generally in continental Europe, it's
yes,
not.
This is also requirement
common,
or at least tendency.
Tendency. It's common, and it is rather difficult to limit the liability of the director of the company, and therefore it might be a bit troublesome to find willing persons who would act as a director unless there is personal relationship between the owners of the company and such person. But if any investor, any foreign person is willing and is ready to serve as the own director of its own company, there is no objection. Foreign person can be freely the director of its own company. As for minimum capital requirement, it has been raised recently. Raised.
Because the tendency is backwards. Somewhere
Hungary has a new civil code, and they raised the minimum capital requirement. It's about $12,000.
$12,000.
$12,000. Otherwise, of course, the setting up and the maintenance of the company requires, as I said, professional services, the level of which can greatly vary depending on the complexity of the company, what kind of advisor the client.
Regarding the accountancy, what is the period of reporting? This is quarter, month, or year?
The reporting period, the accountancy year is 12 months.
12 months.
Generally runs from January 1st to 31st of December, but the companies may change it.
So once a year?
Once a year, that for corporate tax and local taxes. For VAT, it can be monthly, quarterly, or yearly, depending on the value of the value of the payable VAT by the company. Generally, the basic is yearly, and it becomes more frequent if the company carries out higher volume activity. Sorry to interrupt. Just one more interesting point here. Once we talk about accountancy, companies may, by their choice, prepare the accounts in euros, and also there's functional currency rules. It means that if the company's major dealings are carried out in Japanese yen, then it can be Japanese yen. So it's actually a good feature, because not everything has to be converted into Hungarian forints if the company usually is not convenient for a company which has foreign operations.
I see. Regarding the VAT number, is it obtained automatically,
no.
or you should submit separately?
You should submit separately.
I see.
There are companies which operate outside of the VAT regime.
Understand. Okay. And the second question,
which is actually quite strict.
As everywhere. It is everywhere. Now, regarding the double tax treaties and the tax certificate proving that you are the tax resident of Hungary for double tax treaty, is it a technical procedure, or you should really prove? It is technical procedure. That's very good, because there are not a lot of countries where this certificate is obtained automatically if there is the Hungarian director, which is the requirement. So it is technically received.
Well, strictly speaking, the company needs to be Hungarian resident.
Yeah.
This is what the certificate says. A company is Hungarian resident if it was registered in Hungary, or if the company's central management and control carried out in Hungary. So obviously these facts need to be demonstrated.
I see. Yes, in this case, in continental countries, yes, it's more or less okay. Yeah, in comparison with UK, when you should prove that you are the resident for tax purposes. Okay. What else? Maybe the last thing, which is also quite clear from the previous, is bank accounts in Hungary.
Bank accounts. One important point, every single company which is registered in Hungary must have one Hungarian bank account. The companies are free to open bank accounts in any other country, as many as is needed for their operations. These bank accounts do not need to be reported to the Hungarian tax authority, but one bank account needs to be held in a Hungarian bank, and all tax and payroll expenses need to be paid from that Hungarian bank account. This is the reason why.
And I suppose this is the policy of Hungarian banks to work only with Hungarian companies.
No, not really. No, I mean, they obviously have a huge client base because all companies need to have a Hungarian bank account. But Hungarian banks would happily deal with any foreign companies as well. If they're capable of satisfying their due diligence procedures, which some classic offshore companies might fail.
Yes, definitely. What we felt on ourselves is this company should be present in Hungary. This offshore company, so it means, I don't know, as the subsidiary or a representative office, and definitely should have some business interests. And only this is the reason for opening in Hungarian banks. Not the reason, but propusc access. Okay. So I think for the brief introduction of Hungary, that's enough. If you are interested in more sophisticated consultation, you are welcome. До свидания.
До свидания.